this. We are on part 5. I have a review, but I'm going to skip it for the sake of time. We're going to just jump right into part 5 today, and I'm going to go back to the summer of 2019, pre-COVID. Do you remember those times? Sometimes I think, did COVID really happen? Like, did we do that? Was that? But before that, it was the summer of 2019. Nicole and I were about to embark on a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Europe. For the last 12 months before that, I myself had read, had researched, had planned, had booked, had implemented a full 2-week trip that my wife just got to enjoy. But it included places like Denmark, Copenhagen, Salzburg, Vienna, Munich, London, and Toronto. Every flight, every bus, every train, every accommodation had been planned to the smallest of details. And we were ready. It was a trip for the ages. There were many amazing moments. I got to officiate a friend of mine's wedding in Copenhagen, in Denmark. That was really neat. I got to see rivers and streets in Copenhagen, lots of bikes, lots of trains. I got to visit the home and creative spaces where musical legends like Mozart, Beethoven, and Brahms did their creative work. And of course, become the typical tourist in London, seeing Big Ben while in construction, the Tower of London, Buckingham Palace, the Tower Bridge, Westminster Abbey, St. Paul's Cathedral, Trafalgar Square, hundreds of years of architecture and history. It was breathtaking. Our necks were sore because we were looking up all the time. Looking at the sights. We couldn't believe how beautiful everything was. It took us 2 days of bussin' and eatin' and bussin'. And walking just to begin to explore the beauty and the wonder of London. And we weren't the only one there to see the sights. There was lots and lots of people to see the sights. Many other tourists doing the same thing, looking around next up. Wow, that's amazing. Have you seen that before? I've never seen that. We're kind of young in terms of our country. When you go over there, there's a lot more history, and it's amazing. But there were other tourists from all over the world coming to London to explore the sights. But not everyone there were tourists, obviously. We were staying at an Airbnb farther away from the downtown core of London, because honestly, we couldn't afford the downtown core of London. So we were quite far away, and we bussed in. And one of those times, I remember bussing in, and we weren't in the touristy areas. We were just bussing. And I remember looking, and there was a beautiful park in a circle, and there was architecture of old houses all around. And my wife and I are looking at it, and we're like, it's amazing, look at that. And I looked around and realized we were the only people looking around, observing the beauty, the wonder. There was hundreds of other people around. Most were on their phones. Several were on their bikes waiting for the bike light to go so they could all go across on their way to work, on their way to university, about their busy lives. Out of everyone there were 2 of us looking around and a whole bunch of people not looking around anymore. And I was like, what's the difference? Like, what's going on here? We were the only ones out of everyone that noticed the beauty all around us. What a dichotomy it was between Nicole and I. Next, looking around, talking about it, and everyone else just doing what they did. Our mouths were open, heads up, complete awe and wonder. Everybody else's heads were down, mouths closed, just busy, not even looking around. They were late for university, going for coffee. I remember thinking, are they looking at what we're looking? Can they see what we see? Are they seeing this? I couldn't believe how many people were just in the midst of their day going about not even noticing this shocking beauty. And then I was pondering, what's the difference between us and them? The difference is that we had something that they had probably once at one time but had lost along the way. We had something that they no longer grasped or had or maybe forgotten about, and had replaced in their life with duty. Anyone ever felt duty and responsibilities in their lives? They replaced it with responsibility, maybe with business, with jobs, with priorities, with work, with 9 to 5, keeping up with the Joneses. They had replaced it all. This is what we had that they had maybe once had but had long forgotten. We had childlike wonder. childlike wonder, they had adult-like work. Now, I'm not saying work is bad, but it was clear that they no longer saw the beauty and wonder of what was around them. So then I began to think about these sorts of things, and what am I like when I'm at home? Do I find the beauty in my work still? Or do I just go day to day as the same thing like this? Do I feel the beauty in my experience with school? Like when the first time you went to school and it was all new and fresh and childlike? Do I feel beauty still and wonder in my relationships, or do I take them for granted? How do I deal with my family, my marriage, my relationships, my church, my faith, my God, my whatever? Do I take time for childlike wonder in my life? That was the question I was asking. Do you take time for childlike wonder in your life, in your job, with your spouse, with your church, with your faith, with your kids, with your friends, with your God? Could some of the things in your life be the way they are because you've stopped seeing the beauty around you? Because complacency comes in, familiarity, we get a little jaded. There's a saying, I couldn't quite remember it, but I wrote it this way: the life you're living is not boring, you're just living it in a boring way. Or your life you're living doesn't have wonder in it, you're just living it in a wonderless way. Hey, your life can be wonderful. Come on. What if London wasn't actually boring, people were just living it in a boring way? See, I went, but it was new, it was fresh, it was childlike for my wife and I, so we saw the wonder and beauty, but people that had seen it over and over and got familiar with it, they didn't even see it anymore. What if you fill in the blank was not actually boring or whatever you want? What if we're just doing it without wonder? So it's not, oh, this is this, and I don't like this. What if you could do your job with wonder? What if you could approach your marriage again with wonder? What if you could approach that relationship with wonder? What if you could approach Sunday service church with wonder again instead of, yeah, I know this? Because that's the difference between someone coming in for the first time and being like, man, this church is full of the presence of God. This happened, oh my goodness, and they're raving about it. And you went, I sat at the same service. Were we in the same service? Why? Because they had wonder. So we want to talk about today childlike wonder, amen? So we're going to start by looking at an example of some people who lost their wonder and what happened to them because of it. And we're going to be reading from Numbers 13 and 14. But there's a massive background story, context story. And so in light of childlikeness, today I am going to tell you a story. I almost thought about sitting down. Maybe I should, I don't know. But like children's class, we're going to sit, and for a length of time, I'm just going to lay out the story of these people. Some of you may know all of this, and so you can just agree. Some of you may catch, maybe I'm somewhat off, or maybe I'll fill in some spaces. Some of you may never heard this, but I thought in order to talk about the ending where we see a people sort of lose their childlike wonder, I had to kind of give you the history, and I thought in light of childlikeness, I'm just going to tell you a story today. Is that all right? So this story starts with a man named Abraham. Anyone heard of Abraham? Yes. Abram turned to Abraham. He was called and given a word from God that he was going to be the father of many nations. He was told to move from his homeland, take no one with him. He took Lot. That's a whole nother story, but it said, take no one with you. Go to the land that I've called you. And so that started his journey. So Abraham packed up everyone he had and started following God. He was called to be a father of many nations. The problem was he didn't have any kids. How do you become a father of many nations when you don't have any kids? He was showing like the sand and the stars. He's like, you're going to have kids and it's going to number that. He didn't have any. So he got nervous along the way. Him and his wife came up with a solution that still causes conflict today. But eventually, God gave him way past childbearing years. God gave him a son named Isaac. And so Abraham has Isaac. There's a whole lot of things that happen with Isaac, a lot of different stories and scenarios. And so then Isaac does this. Actually, one of them is Abraham comes up to Isaac one day and he's like, we're going to the mountain for a sacrifice. And Isaac's like, let's do this, Dad. It was a custom. They would do that. They get to the mountain. And Isaac's, he's pretty old by then. He's a little bit older. And he's like, Dad, what are we going to use for the sacrifice? And Abraham's like, I'm going to use you today, son. And Isaac's like, great. That's so good. Thanks, Dad. Right? I don't have time to get into it, but he literally lays him on there. And as he's about to because God said, hey, go do this. God just wanted to see if he trusted him fully with everything. And that's an amazing sacrifice. I don't have time to get into things about an Abraham sacrifice. But that's when God asks you to do something, and if you're willing to do it, it's like it was done. You don't have to follow through with it. But anyways, and so there's a ram that's provided. Isaac's life gets preserved. And then Isaac has a son named Jacob, and so you'll hear this a lot. The father of Abraham, Isaac, and because God's generational. And so he prophesied into that, but then we got this guy named Jacob, and he falls in love with a lady. I think he's in a field one day and he sees her from afar and he's just like, man, that's the woman of my dreams. And so he goes to her dad and says, hey, I want to marry her because I got a good deal for you. Gentlemen, listen up. This is how you win dad's hearts. Some of you are laughing because you know this story. It's like, let me make you a deal. If you work for me 7 years, I'll give you my daughter. Some guys aren't even wanting to work for 7 minutes. Come on. Ooh. The problem, I don't know. See, some guys are only willing to work for 7 minutes, but some ladies, that's all you, yeah. Come on. We need some more 7-year men in this place. Okay. But anyway, so we get 7 years. The wedding day comes. It must have been some kind of veil, if you know the story. The wedding comes. I don't know what happened in there. I don't know how they did the custom of their weddings. But he gets to his wedding night, I'm assuming, and getting to consummate the marriage. And he lifts the veil or something, and he's like, whoa, you're not the one I fell in love with. See, he loved a daughter named Rachel, and the dad pulled a fast one on him. And he gave him Leah. And so he gets there, and he's like, this is not what I ordered from Amazon. No, that's not how it happened, right? And so then the dad, I don't know, he must have just loved what was happening. He was getting a lot of work from Jacob, and he's getting free labor. He's like, this is the best. So he makes up an excuse. You have to marry the oldest daughter first. Didn't I tell you that? Oops. I don't know why I didn't inform you that before, but so he's already married. So he's like, guess what, though? If you work another 7 years, you can have this one. So you had to work 14 years to get the woman of his dreams. Some of you have been waiting a few years, and you're like, God, where is the one? Listen, they're coming. Maybe you need to get in the field and start plowing. And working for God. I don't have time to preach on that. So anyways, he finally marries Rachel. So then there's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He marries Rachel. Leah has all these kids, and Rachel's struggling to have kids. And so he has 11 kids at this point, and finally Joseph comes. He's the youngest. Rachel gets a son. She's so amazing, so blessed by this. And so Jacob favors Joseph because all the other ones were from Leah. There's a whole lot of identity teaching you can do with Leah versus Rachel. And then Rachel has Joseph, so he favors him. He's the youngest. He gives him a coat of many colors. Maybe you heard about this. And then Joseph has this great idea. He's already the favorite from his dad. He's the youngest. You know how that is. How many youngest children know you were the favorite probably? Middle child's just completely forgotten about all the time. And the oldest is always the smartest because they got the most time. By the time you get to the other kids, you're splitting it up and they get a bag of chips on the way out, right? Here, take this for lunch, right? And so Joseph's favored, and then he has dreams and visions, and he goes and tells his brothers, guess what, big brothers? You're going to worship me one day. And he tells them, and they're like, who are you, you little twerp, And so he does it enough to tick him off that they want to get rid of him. They're done with him. And so they have this great idea one time when Joseph's out in the fields with them, that they're going to grab his coat, put some blood on it, and go back and tell their dad that he's dead. And so they throw him into a well, empty well to leave him. And one of the brothers actually said to do it because he was going to come back and save him later. But then they have this idea. They see a caravan of slave traders going by, so they decide to sell him to slavers. They go back, tell the dad he's dead, and then that's where they think of it. So now we go and follow the story of Joseph, who ends up getting sold as a slave in Egypt to a guy named Potiphar. And when he's there, he has favor. He extends, like everyone, favor's always on him. And he's running the household, but Potiphar's wife takes a look into him and likes him and is trying to make the moves on him, and Joseph keeps rejecting. And one time, I guess there was something that happened where they were alone, and she tried to make the moves on him. And Joseph said no. She got his coat, and then she made up this whole story about how Joseph did something to her. So, of course, the Potiphar goes out, that's it, and sends him into prison. So slave, favor rises up, false accusation, goes into prison, and he's in prison for a while, meets up with a baker and a butler. Yo, baker, yo, butler, what's going on? King didn't like him, got sent to prison. They have some dreams, and he interprets the dreams. I actually don't remember which one got killed and which one went back to the king's court, but one of them, David said, you're going to go back. I think it was I don't know. Does anyone remember? The butler did it? No, I'm just kidding. The butler went back and the baker didn't make it? Right. Yeah, in the living room with a candlestick, right? So the butler goes back, and so Joseph tells him this is what's going to happen. I can't imagine interpreting someone's dream and going, better luck next time, but you're going to die, you know. But this guy, he's going back to the king's court. So he does. He says, hey, don't forget about me. Of course, the guy does. And then the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, has a dream. And he can't interpret it. All his magicians, nobody can interpret it. And he's like, hey, I'll do, somebody needs to help me. This is such a vivid dream. And all of a sudden, the butler's like, ding, wait, I know a guy. And meanwhile, Joseph's having favor in the prison. He's running the prison. He's got org charts going. He's got schedules going. Everything's going well in the prison. But then he calls Joseph, and Joseph comes in, hears the dream, and he interprets it and says, there's going to be 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. And so what you have to do is store up during the 7 years of plenty so that you don't run out of stuff in 7 years of famine. So Pharaoh, the leader of all of Egypt, puts Joseph in charge of everything next to him. From a prison to a palace. That's amazing. Pardon? Prince of Egypt Part 2. And so Joseph's there. Everything he's collecting for 7 years. Then the famine kicks in, and it starts going everywhere. And it starts to affect Joseph's family that he has been estranged from for a long time. And so they hear Egypt has food. So they come in to trade something, not knowing it's Joseph that they meet with. He recognizes them, but he's far changed from when he was little, so they don't recognize him, and they're interacting with him. And Joseph wants to see if they've changed their heart and everything like that, so he says, do you have any other brothers or anything like that? And they've now had Benjamin, which was the second son to Rachel, which again was Jacob's dearest because his other youngest died, so he thought. And so Joseph comes up with something, you got to bring him back. And they're all like, well, we can't bring him back because what if he keeps him in Benjamin and our dad won't be able to do it? But eventually they bring him back, throws people into prison. All this sort of stuff happens, but at one moment he can't take it anymore. And he reveals himself to his family. And they're like, oh, the dream did come true. We are bowing down and worshiping you. Silly us, right? And so he says, no, you sent me forward to prepare a way to preserve God's chosen people. Because that's who Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they were God's chosen people. That's what he referred to them. The Israelites are the Hebrew people. And so then Joseph is there, and they all move to Egypt. And that's what takes them from the Canaan or Hebron, where most of them were living, into Egypt. And now they were there, and everything's good, and they're growing and thriving when Joseph's there. The Pharaoh knows Joseph, he's accepting. But remove a few pharaohs, Joseph has died, Jacob has died, and some pharaohs have moved on, and all of a sudden one pharaoh's looking out over everyone, and he goes, there's a lot of them Israelites out there. A lot of them people, and if they wanted to do something, they could probably cause some damage. They might ever be able to take over the throne. And so he gets this great idea. We need to make them slaves. That'll slow them down. And so now the Hebrew people get put into slavery. They weren't in slavery for 430 years from what I've read. They were in Egypt for 430 years, but somewhere along the line when that shifted, they were in slavery for a length of time. A significant length of time. And so they're there, and that doesn't seem to be working. They're still growing, they're still thriving. So the Pharaoh says, let's kill every young boy 2 years and under. Sound familiar? And so they wipe out every firstborn, or they try to. And in that process, there's a little Hebrew boy named Moses, who they know that's going on. And so to try to preserve his life, this is a sling idea, referencing a few messages ago, if you know what I mean. They wrap him in a basket, they make sure it's waterproof, and they're like, let's just float him down this river and see what happens. Like I don't know, maybe like it's a sling idea if you know what I'm saying. Like, you don't do that. And so they float him down the river. They send one of the daughters, watch what happens to Moses, because he was going to get killed. And he's going down the water, and Pharaoh's daughter's in there. Well, she probably wasn't washing any clothes, so she was probably just beautifying, bathing, I don't know. And she hears it and goes, who's this baby? And clearly recognizes it's a Hebrew. And some reason, instead of saying, kill this baby, says, I want to keep this baby. Which is profound. And so the little girl that's watching, and there's kind of a discussion, and basically they say, hey, do you want someone to breastfeed, to take care of the baby until he's weaned off? And they're like, yeah, that's a great idea. I know someone. And so Moses gets to be brought up in the formative years of his life where someone can teach him who he is. That's important, because 0 to 5 parents are the most formative years of a kid's life. This isn't, I don't have time for this, but anything after 5, there is hope. But anything after 5, you're working backwards, I'm convinced of. If you work at 0 to 5, then from there you're building on that. But if things are put in from 0 to 5, you got to unpack those, because 0 to 5 are the most formative years. So Moses, I believe, probably till about 5, gets that time with his mom. She's nursing him. He gets weaned off, and then he goes to the palace, and he lives with Pharaoh in the biggest kingdom in the palace. And he gets trained in their ways, he gets taught in their ways, he gets taught in all of that. And so he's learned both sides, but still remembering where he came from. So one day he's out there, he's growing, and he's watching what he would know as his people, and he sees one of the Egyptian guards looking over the Hebrew slaves, and they're beating the slaves because they're not listening or whatever, and he gets really upset, and he strikes the Egyptian guard and kills him. And then he buries him and is like, oh, I hope nobody saw. And then the next day he checked his social media and thought, I'm in trouble. Because it was plastered all over social media. And it was like, Joseph kills Egyptian guard. What are we going to do? Right? So Joseph goes, uh-oh. And so he flees to Midian. Moses. Moses. This is a long story, hey? I'm doing it from memory. Moses. I don't know when I shifted to Joseph. I was just trying to see if you guys were paying attention. You passed the test. Well done, children. So Moses kills the guard. He flees to Midian. He's getting away. He's like, I'm done, because this, And he finds a nice family there. He takes care of sheep, meets a lady, marries her, has a family, and he's been doing that for a while. And one day, he's taking care of sheep and different things like that, and he sees a bush burning. I'm almost done. Some of you are yawning. I know. It's a long story. Yeah. Bible, the Old Testament, and 5 books of the Bible in this sort of time. He sees a bush burning, which wouldn't have been abnormal. I think they probably would have had a lot of fires just starting from dry. But the thing that made this one different is it wasn't burning up. It just kept burning and staying the same. So he's like, I got to go check that out. And as he gets closer, a voice comes from the burning bush and says, this is the Lord. You're on holy ground. Take off your sandals, and begins to speak to him and say, I've called you to go help set the people free. I've heard their cries. You need to go to Pharaoh and tell him, I am sent you, and go set the people free. And Moses is like, what? The reason why I'm saying that, because Moses tries to use an excuse or saying it like that. I don't speak well. I don't know, maybe he did struggle with speaking or stuttering or something. He grew up in the Egyptian courts. He would have been taught. So I don't know if he got nervous or had anxiety, just couldn't speak in front of people. But he's like, I can't do this. And so God's like, all right, I'll send your brother Aaron with you. But you got to go. And so they go and muster up their courage, go to Pharaoh, and they say, hey, you got to let all these people go. And he started laughing at them. He's like, what do you mean? They're making everything for me. Like, we don't have to do anything. They're doing all this. No way I'm going to let them go. And he's like, well, God said you must, and if you don't, things are going to happen. And so they start off where they throw down their scepters and it turns to serpents, but then the magicians of Egypt do the same thing. But then Moses' snake eats the other snakes, and all this cool thing's happening. And then they turn water into blood, and they turn it into a vase, but they turn the whole Nile River into blood. And so now it's starting to escalate, and then all these plagues start happening that eventually the Egyptian magicians can't copy. And it gets worse and worse, and Pharaoh goes, I'm going to let him go. No, I'm just psych. I'm not letting him go. Ha, suckers. And then I'm going to let him go, after frogs or pestilence or darkness or all these things would happen, right? And he's like, I'm letting him go, just tricked you, And then it culminates in the last one where the angel of death comes. And this is where we get Passover. It's the type and shadow of Christ, where we do communion. It's all around this, where they said they had to put the blood of a lamb over their doorpost. Because if they didn't, an angel of death came, and the firstborn in every household that didn't have the blood on their doorpost would die. Hebrew or Egyptian. And so that night comes, and people came to find that their kids, their oldest boys, were no longer living. And they said, yeah, you got to get out of here. We can't do this. And everyone stood up and said, Pharaoh, let him go. And not only that, remember what I said last week about praise? That when we praise, it paves the way for the Lord to fight, so that when you get there, all you have to do is pick up the provision. When they sent them out, they were paying him to leave. It says they asked him, they were like, take this. You need this? Please just get out of there. They literally picked up provision as they left. They said, get out of here. You'll take anything you want. And so they embark on this journey of freedom, and we enter our story now, or the end of the story and into some things now. Story time is done. And now we'll get some teaching. So that's where we're kind of jumping in a little bit into this. Maybe a little bit more story. So for the first time in decades, the Israelites get to see God in action. Remember, they've just been slaves, crying out, God, where are you? And God has seemed to be far away. Anyone ever felt like that before? You're crying out to God, God, where are you? And it just seems like he's far away. So the first time in decades, they see all these wondrous things that God does. And so they leave on a high. They're paying him to go. They're walking out. They're saying, we're going to a promised land. It's got milk and honey. And so they get to see God, and their childlike wonder gets stirred. I am sure very few of them had childlike wonder during their times as slaves. That probably just stopped inside of them. They leave Egypt on a high load of spoils. They begin their journey back to the land God promised them in Canaan. It was there's a lot of discussion on this, but about some 400 kilometers away, depending on how direct their route was. They have some ups and downs along the way. So they travel and they get to the Red Sea. And they go, how do we get across? And as they're deciding what to do about the Red Sea, Pharaoh goes, wait a minute, I am dumb. I have no one left to do anything. We have to do all the work. That's just not smart. Let's go back and get our army and bring them back. So they take the whole army to go get the Israelite people back. And so the Israelites are there waiting. And, I forgot to say this. Do you know something cool that happened while they were traveling? They got led by a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. That's how they knew where to go. They were just being followed. God was leading them by that. So that's another miraculous, wonderful thing. That would be cool. Can you imagine just someone driving every day, and instead of GPS or Siri, they're getting led by a pillar of fire or a cloud? That's what I'm following. God says, go and follow this. That'd be amazing. You'd be filled with wonder. And so they're doing that. They get to the Red Sea. This Egyptian army comes behind them. I guess story time wasn't done. The Egyptian army comes behind them, and they all start freaking out. We're going to die. So the cloud comes in between. God gives Moses something to do. He holds up his staff, and the Red Sea parts. And they walk across on dry land. They walk across on dry land, and they get across, and the Egyptian army goes, hey, they can do it, we can too, right? If God did it before, he can do it again. Sorry, Egyptians, you don't get to sing that song, not for you. So they cross, and it becomes muddy. They get stuck, and eventually the water comes in and destroys the Egyptian army once and for all, and they never have to worry about the Egyptian army in Egypt again. And it was such a powerful moment that we made a song about it. I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. His horse and rider thrown into the sea. Splish, splash. A kid's song about death. Wow, that's great. The kids' rhyme songs that you actually don't know what you mean. I was like, we would sing that in church. They all died in the water. Yay, yay. That's crazy. Anyways, that's just how I think as I was singing that. It was like, I will sing the horse and the rider thrown into the sea. Splish, splash. They weren't splish, splashing, let me tell you. They were gurgling, right? So we sing that in a kids class. I don't know if we sing it anymore, but that's kind of funny to me that I was like, we're all rejoicing. Hey, we didn't know what we were singing about, trust me. But they get a miraculous thing, and they sing on the other side. It says they sang. That's probably something they sang. And they're in wonder, of childlike wonder of, man, God can do some things. And so there's ups and downs along the way. They got shortage of water. They come to a bitter water. God does something. It turns it to sweet. They're like, man, God's wonderful. He's amazing. They're running out of food. God feeds them for manna miraculously through birds and different things like that. It's amazing. They run out of water again. They strike a rock, and water comes out of it. That's amazing. So they have all these wonderful things happening. But many times along this journey, the Israelites struggle with the after effects of slavery or bondage or pain or trauma. They watch God do many wonderful things, yet they continuously struggle to hold on to that childlike wonder the next time they went through something. The next time they had to face something, oftentimes they would say things like, man, if we would have never left. If we would have never left, if only we could return to what? To slavery? But that's what they wished for or talked about, often romanticizing what it was like before. Can anyone sound familiar or relate to that when dealing with pain, dealing with rejection, dealing with trauma? Oftentimes, because it's all we know, we find ourselves going back to that place of least familiarity, even though we know it kept us captive. And oftentimes even almost romanticizing it, because you would see later, I'm getting ahead of myself, they're like, it was amazing in Egypt. We got fed everything. And they're like, really? You were slaves. That's not how it happened. Right? And so they wanted to go back. Why? Because they were still learning childlike wonder, but they had the woe of the past. When dealing with the woe of a pain-filled past, it can be difficult to hold on to the wonder of a promise-filled future. I'm going to say that again. When dealing with the woe of the past, it can be difficult to hold on to the wonder of a promise-filled future. That's going to come up there, right? Thank you. Chaya was into the story. I haven't had to put notes on for a while. When dealing with the woe of past, when I first wrote that, I did W-O-A-H, and I'm like, that doesn't seem right. Woe of the past, although it could be. You want a woe on the woe. Okay, I won't go any further on that. It can be difficult to hold on to the wonder of a promise-filled future. Here's another way of saying that. Your past will always try to rob you of a wonderful future. Your past will always try to rob you of a wonderful future. Come on, can we just give a shout out to Jesus in this moment? No matter your past, no matter your bondage, no matter your slavery, no matter what pain, no matter what trauma, that past does not have to keep you from a wonderful future because of Jesus. Amen? And so the Israelites' past repeatedly causes them to lose their childlike wonder of God. Remember, God had done a lot of things in a short span. A couple years span, like Red Sea, got them out, Red Sea, like all these things. In this 2-year span from Egypt to Kadesh Barnea. And we get this moment cultivating here where they're on the brink of stepping into the promised land. It's been over 2 years, probably 2.5 years. They spent a couple years at Mount Sinai, working everything, all this thing's happening, God's moving, and they're struggling with wanting to go back. And they get this moment, they're on the brink, and this is where we jump into this account in Numbers 13, 1-2. It says this, the Lord spoke to Moses saying, send my men to spy out the land of Canaan. That's the promised land. They've just traveled, all of this has happened, this is going on. And he says, which I am giving to the children of Israel. That's important to note. God is giving. Amen. From each tribe of the fathers you shall send a man, everyone a leader among them. Listen, this wasn't just so-and-so. These were the leaders, the young next-gen leaders of every tribe. There was 12 tribes based on the sons of Jacob, 12 tribes of Israel, and they send the leaders out to go check out the land, the most trusted, the most committed, the most brave young leaders. They said, send out these leaders to spy out the land. God says, send them out to spy out the land to tease you so you can see what you're going to miss out on. No, he didn't say that. He said, send them out to taunt you so you kind of go, oh no, this is what we can't have. That's not what he said. Send it out to wave under your noses and go, na 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 na, this is our, no, that's not what it said. He said, send them out this. He goes, send out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. He says, spy out the land that I am giving you. They got armed with a word from God. Remember, we talked about that in the past. And they sent out leaders from each tribe to go out and spy out the land. What were they spying out the land to do? To see if the land was able to be taken? No. When you get a word from God, you don't then have to go and see if it's if. They weren't told to go spy out the land to see if it was able to be taken. They were supposed to go spy out the land to see how it was going to be taken. Because God said what? I am giving. And we find out that God was giving a land that was giving. It was giving freedom. It was giving milk. It was giving honey. It was giving blessing. I'm using the slang of today. It's giving. Anyone heard that? See how I worked that in to sound like current and relevant? It's giving milk, it's giving honey, it's giving blessing, it's giving provision, it's giving shelter, it's giving grapes, it's giving fruit. Oh, but wait, it's giving giants, big walls, strong, fortified structures. Yeah, okay, it's giving some of that too, but it's giving. God said, this is the land that I'm giving you. Numbers 13, 26 to 33, here's what happened. They departed and came back to Moses and Aaron, all the congregation of the children of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. Look what it's giving. Then they told them and said, we went to the land where you sent us. Watch this. It truly flows with milk and honey. And this is its fruit. They were like, wow, they were in wonder of that. But then they negated it all and said, nevertheless, their but. You know what big buts do? They just get rid of everything that came before it. So he says, but the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Then they have all the Ites, Amalekites, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Canaanites, dwell by the sea along the banks of the Jordan. Then Caleb, thank God for Caleb, he tried. Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession. Let us go up once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome. You know why he said that? Because there was a word. But the men who had gone up with him, remember, leaders, said, we're not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people who we saw are men of great stature. There we saw the giants, who were the descendants of Anak, came from the giants. And we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. To do it. Why? Because the case should never be more important than the cause. But I don't think they forgot they had a word. It was just given. They knew God said take it. So what happened along the way? They knew God told them to go to the promised land. Jacob and Caleb tried to remind them. But here's what happens. When you lose your wonder of God, even a word from God seems like it's not enough. They had a word, but they lost their wonder of God along the way. And even when you have a word, if you don't have wonder or childlike wonder, it can seem like it's not enough because you actually wonder if God can actually do his word. And that's what he said, I'm giving it to you. And he said, I wonder if you can actually do that wonder. Because they still had the God who delivered them from Egypt. I'm going to be wrapping up soon, if those of you who like to watch the time. Who parted the Red Sea, they crushed the army of the Egyptians. He miraculously fed them, gave them water in the desert, who made sure their clothes never got old or small, who led them by a cloud of glory by day, a pillar of fire by night. They forgot about the wonderful God in the woe-filled moment. How many times, church, do we forget about a wonderful God in a woe-filled moment? Numbers 14, so all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried. The people wept that night. They're like, woe is us. All the children of Israel complained. Someone say complained. See, when childlike wonder gets replaced with adult-like woe, you'll know it's happening because all you'll hear is complaining. Complaining. It says they complained against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, if only we had died in the land of Egypt or in the wilderness. What's the difference? Like, you're going to die there taking the land. At least you died trying to do something. Like, it's crazy, but they get this woe. And they start complaining. And then we see the effects of slavery still on them. The moment something happens to them, where they feel like it's not happening, they revert to that space of not childlike wonder, but woe. And you want to revert back to that. And so when you lose your wonder of God, church, you will choose the wilderness of the past over the milk and honey of the future. When we lose our wonder of God, we will choose the wilderness of the past over the milk and honey of the future, because at least it's something we think we know. Can I just tell you another pause? We talked about Jesus before, but I want to tell you God is greater. God is greater. If you were at prayer this morning, we just stepped into the idea that I've seen you move, talking about God, you've moved the mountain, and I believe I'll see you do it again. That idea, if he did it before, he can do it again. And then we looked at the idea, if he did it before, Ephesians 3:20 says he's going to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. I said, not only will he do it again, God will supersede himself. So the wilderness of the past should not hold you in any longer. But believe God, the wonder of God can take you, and God gets a little upset. He says to Moses, how long will these people reject me? In Numbers 14:11, how long will they not believe me with all the signs and wonders that I performed among them? He's like, I've done a lot of wonderful things, and it's still not working. And he wants to get rid of them and start over with Moses. He's like, I'm going to start over with you. Throw in Joshua and Caleb maybe. And Moses acts like a type of Christ. He intercedes. He says, you can't do that. People know that you're supposed to bring them out. They'll know you as a this, but you want to be known as a God, your name will be tarnished. How about be known for long-suffering, mercy, forgiveness, so God doesn't wipe them out. But he says this, and then we're going to be done. He says, everyone who's over 20 will not walk into the promised land. Because they weren't willing to keep their childlike wonder. And so he said, I've actually got to pass it to those that are of the age that still have that in them. Church, I don't care what age you are. Remember, I talked about childlike is not an age. It's a position you understand yourself in Christ. But church, we don't want to be the ones that our woe of the past hold us back from the wonder that God has for us in the future, and then becomes a point where he says, yeah, actually, you're not going to be able to step in because of this. Because our woe went to complaining and other things. And so he tells them, anyone 20 and over, except for Joshua and Caleb, remember they gave a good report. And he says this, and then I'm wrapping up. But as for you, your carcasses shall fall in the wilderness. And this is Moses included. That was because he hit the rock. That's another thing. And your sons shall be shepherds of the wilderness 40 years. Come on, say 40 years. And bear the brunt of your infidelity until your carcasses are consumed in the wilderness, according to the numbers of days in which you spied out the land. 40 days, for each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year. So because they were in there 40 days and gave a bad report, basically he's like, I got to get rid of the generation that does not live with childlike wonder. Really, that's what's happening. That don't believe I can do what I said. Don't believe when I say this land I've given you that you can walk into it. Church, we've got to step into childlike wonder because there's some things God's saying he's giving us that it's going to take us childlike wonder to step into. There's things God's put in your heart and your life that you're going to need to step into childlike wonder and go, God gave me a word, so I'm walking it. And if we consult some of our past and different things in the woe, we won't step into it and then we'll miss it. And it says they ended up wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. They were one step in of God's word of the promised land on that day when they got there at Kadesh. And instead they wandered around for 40 years because without wonder, we will wander. Without wonder, we will wander. Why? Because there's only some things we can step into that require childlike wonder. And if we don't, we just wander. So church, if you've ever felt like you've just been wandering, maybe you've been struggling with staying consistent, staying in place, staying committed, this desire to wander, you just see people that can't put down roots. Maybe you need to check in with your wonder of what God can do in your life. Is your attention wandering in your marriage? Maybe you stopped wondering about your spouse. Come on. Is your passion starting to wander from your calling? Maybe you stopped wondering about your calling. Is your desire wandering away from God? Maybe you stopped wondering about God. Are your hopes beginning to wander? Maybe you stopped wondering about what God has for you. Church, it's time to ponder the wonder. It's time to ponder the wonder. And this is how you do it. I know I kind of made fun of this before, but if we put it in the right context, this is how you do it by saying these three words. I wonder what? I wonder what? When is the last time you said, I wonder what about something in your life? I wonder what it would be like to jump out of an airplane, right, Pat? I still hold on to that. See, Pat has wonder. I wonder what it would like to be getting into a Formula F1 race car. You know, I'm not saying you have to do it, but I wonder what it would be like to stay up past 9 o'clock on a Friday. I wonder what it would be like to come to prayer at 9:30 on a Sunday. Huh? Oh yeah, it got a lot quieter there. But I wonder what it would be like. I wonder what? Someone say, I wonder what? See, I wonder what God is going to do this time next year, by this time next year. I wonder what God has in store for me and you next, for this church next. I wonder what God has in store for my marriage. I wonder what God has in store for my kids. I wonder what God has in store for my finances. I wonder what God has in store for my strength. I wonder what. That was me. Guess what? You guys can say that for you. I wonder what God has in store for you next. I wonder what God has in store for our church next. We need to start wondering about what God can do again. So this week, purpose to find some places to wonder. Not wonder, God, wonder, God, what do you want to do? Because I've seen you move, God. You've moved mountains. Man, and I know you can do it again. Start having childlike wonder moments in God. God is wonderful. God will do it. I've seen him move, and he's going to do it again. Amen, church? I've been getting a few pictures, people sending pictures. If you get those texts on Friday, Thursday, Friday, reminding you about the weekend service, what's coming up, if you're on Keep Connected, all you actually have to do is take a picture, attach it to that text, put a little caption, and send it back to us, and we'll get it. So if you get those texts, just take a picture, attach it to that. If you don't know how to do that, ask someone who's under 20, and they'll help you with that. But that's it. That's all I have That's what God told me, and I feel stirred. I feel my wonder being stirred of what God can do. Amen? Amen? Hallelujah. Father God, we just thank you that our wonder of you is being ignited again, like children. That we're not going around looking at London for the 10th time, but it's like it's new again. And if there's some places that we've had pain, we've had bondage, we've had imprisonment, we've had trauma, that the woe of that does not keep us from your wonder-filled future for us. God, that I just release wonder in the area of calling, in the area of purpose. I speak wonderment, being full in the area of relationships with kids, with spouses, with family, in their jobs, in their school, that we go around, God, in wonder of you every moment. In Jesus' name.